Okay, it's now been live streamed, so I'll get rid of that. It's my pleasure to open this meeting of the Regional Public Transport Committee. Thank you, recording. So I'll just repeat that. It's my pleasure to open the Regional Council Public Transport Committee, and welcome to everyone here. Just a statement that we need to say. I remind members and staff that the public sessions of this meeting are being live streamed and recorded, and that the recording will be made available to the Bay of Plenty Regional Council website following this meeting. I also remind all present that local government decision making affords no protection to councillors, council officers, and the public for comments made during meetings that are subsequently challenged in a court of law and determined to be slanderous. So with that, let's get going. Just a reminder that as an opener, that we are a governance group and we need to think strategically and not so much operationally, but keep it at a high level. And can I call for apologies? I have an apology from Chairman Leader, and Councillor Rose has notified us that he will need to leave at 11 a.m. Are there any further apologies?
Mayor Judy Turner, Mr. Chair.
Mayor Judy Turner. And Lyle, would you like to second that? Move that, should I say?
Happy to move, Chairman.
Happy to move. Jane, are you happy to second that? Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Public forum. We have the Hei Iwi Kotari Tauranga Moana Charitable Trust presenting to us this morning. Gordy Rockhurst, you I believe are presenting. I see you've got some of your team here. If you'd like to quickly introduce them and then get going. Thank you.
Kia ora all. Thank you very much. And I'll just clarify, my name's Gordy Lockhart. Although Gordy Rockhurst sounds fabulous, I think I'll take that.
Yeah, I know. Okay.
So yes, my name's Gordy Lockhart. I'm one of the trustees of the Iwi Tauranga Moana Charitable Trust, and together with Buddy Mackay over there, who is chair of the trust. And yes, this morning we'll be taking you through a short presentation on a request that sits before council.
Morena koutou ngā mihi o te rā kia koutou, tēnā koutou, kia ora rā koutou katoa. Yes, Gordy and I are the chair and deputy chair of Iwi Kotahi Trust. The trust was established to organise and run the annual Waitangi Day celebrations. And we're also getting into several other things, but not important as far as today's kaupapa is concerned. But thank you, councillors and council staff and others for the opportunity to present to you in public forum. For a number of years, the Regional Council has been a strong supporter of ours. One of the things that Regional Council has done, apart from also providing some funding, is to provide free bus transport from downtown Tauranga, basically, out to the historic village, which is where the festival has been taking place for the last 3 years now. There's a precedent for what we're asking, which is that the Transport Committee gives some consideration to perhaps, one, the continuation of that support, but two, as a way of increasing the exposure of the event, if you like, considering making Waitangi Day a free bus day throughout the region. So we're supported across the board by a wide range of various sponsors, some of them who are listed here. But in addition, we also have people like the Port of Tauranga, farmers who are, as you know, are putting in a new development in Elizabeth Street in the middle of the city. Windstone Wallboards, who are also bringing almost their entire business to the city as well, with their new plant currently under construction out at Tauriko. So we do have some heavyweight supporters behind us, and I think it just demonstrates the width and the breadth of the support that we have attracted for Waitangi Day. Right, so our objectives, all around the treaty, of course, and to raise the level of understanding where we can about the treaty and what it means, not just another day off work. But the focus that we've been trying to do is to make this a real community and family event. So we do have a focus on getting families involved, a range of people from across our community to come together and collaborate. So it's not just a day sitting on the lawn listening to music, although that's obviously a highlight. But we also have an education program which goes all day as well. We also have the ability of young kids in particular to get involved in artistic type activities that relate to the day, and a whole range of other activities. If you haven't been yet, I encourage you to come next year. It's going to be amazing. Next slide, Gordy. So all this, I think, is pretty straightforward to this group in particular.
I think it's worth noting, Buddy, isn't it, that as a core goal of the trust, that we really see this particular day as advancing year on year. And I think that the core goal that we've talked about as the trust is that we want to see on the news, on One News on 6th of February every year, the events happening at Waitangi in Northland, and of course immediately after that, Tauranga being a focus of New Zealand's Waitangi Day celebrations.
Yeah, certainly our goal is to make it even bigger than Waitangi if we can. So working hard on that. I'm sorry, I didn't spell buses. I'm sure it's only got one S in the middle. It's your fault, Gordy.
I think I've just been thrown under that bus.
So these are some of the advantages we see of having those free buses on Waitangi Day. Raising awareness about our amazing transport system. Actually, I think it's a totally underutilized resource, and hopefully that we can use this opportunity to change the way of thinking about that. I'm a big fan, of course, of the healthy environment area, and again, using buses rather than cars. Here we go. Here's an opportunity to make a good contribution. So that's short and sweet.
Yep. No, thank you. Now, just to be clear, we public forums, we are not in a position to make any decisions today on them, but we invite members of the committee to ask points of clarification only, and we'll proceed with there. My initial comment is it's a pity really that you went a little earlier with this presentation this year, because time is against us with the scheduling of public transport meetings. But that doesn't preclude, depending on the level that staff can't have, or the chairman of the regional council don't have discretion to allow that. Now I've got, I can see 5 up there, and I'll go in order that I see them. It's Councillor Thurston first.
Thank you, Chairman, and tēnā koe, Buddy, and your team. I know we can only ask points of clarification, but I fully support this. But having said that, Chairman, we've had these requests in the past, and sometimes they come with a very short time frame in terms of staff and implementation. But Buddy made reference in his presentation to being region-wide. So if we do move to progress this, I would certainly hope that we would check out similar initiatives for Waitangi Day across the region, both in Rotorua and Whakatane, and make a similar gesture to other communities. So, but no, it's hardly a clarification, but a big tick from me.
Councillor Nees.
Thank you. Great to see you, Gordy and Buddy. The partnerships with Maori is a strategic priority for the Bay of Plenty Regional Council, and I absolutely support your call. My question is, have you plans to have other celebrations across the region in tandem with your request for free buses across the whole of the region on Waitangi Day?
Buddy, you want to take that?
Say again, Gordy.
I was saying, Buddy, you want to take that? He's on mute.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find where I am on the screen so I can unmute. Sorry. No, at the moment we're confined ourselves to the Tauranga Moana region. We don't feel it's our place to try and tell other communities what to do, but it seems to me that because Regional Council has been so generous to us, why that shouldn't extend and be an encouragement to those other communities to also mark Waitangi Day in an appropriate way for their community.
And I think I'd echo that absolutely and suggest that, you know, it's that the idea of having a free public transport service on that day can only encourage others in other areas to do similar things with their own communities.
Thank you. Councillor Rose.
Tēnā kōrewa, e raka te rama, no mai haere mai e te Public Transport Committee ki Waitangi Day e haere tonu au. So kia ora Buddy, kia ora Gordy. Hey, look, I guess my only question would be in and around, pretty much following on from Councillor Nees, obviously you don't work with other organisations across the region around us, but would you guys be open to doing so if it was something that could help this sort of cope up around getting free buses across the region going forward?
Oh, without a doubt, we're happy to provide a template if it's needed of the kind of things that we do and how we get ourselves organised and who we can go to for support and that kind of thing. So no, more than happy to help.
Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Kia ora, Buddy. Kia ora, Gordy. Look, just a couple of points of clarification. The first one is and I'm going to call them your engaged audience who come along to your celebrations. Do they mainly come from Tauranga and the Mount, or do you pull from the whole region in general? So that's my first question.
I'll cover that one, Buddy, if you want, if you like, in the sense that it's a very good question, Phil. I mean, right now we don't know. We have some plans in place as a trust to actually grab some data around that at this next event. I guess the first 3 years have been a matter of build and try and get people there. Not necessarily sure that it mattered at that point where they were from. But now we've actually got some good attendances. From now on, it's going to be really trying to identify where people are coming from. Obviously, the idea of being able to pull in some free public transport areas around the Western Bay will certainly help get folk from outside of the Tauranga region. But I guess if you ask that question this time next year, we definitely have some data for you.
Great, thank you. And you know, here in Rotorua, we're very used to hosting people from Tauranga and in the Mount, but obviously we'd love to return the favour and let a few of our people come and see you guys. Look, my second question was just around the free bus service you're asking for on the day, either in Tauranga or region-wide. I presume that's all buses, not just buses coming to and from your celebrations. So you're talking about, you know, the local bus to the shops and everything else.
I would suggest so, absolutely, yeah. And I think the idea of having a free public transport network on Waitangi Day does more than just appeal to the idea of Waitangi Day. It gets people out and about on a day off. It encourages families to do something together. It's obviously primarily for the idea of celebrating Waitangi Day, but it goes beyond that to much more sort of societal centric concepts.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much.
Councillor Thompson, last question.
Yeah, kia ora, Buddy and Gordy, absolutely brilliant. I know we're not allowed to make a decision today, but you've got the big, big, big thumbs up for me. Question to staff, through you, Chair. When can we make a decision in terms of supporting this simply for Tauranga Moana and or the wider region? So when can we make the decision? Thanks.
Matt or James, I suggest.
Yeah, three, Mr. Chairman. So we'd need to look at the potential lost revenue and quantify the size and scale of that decision. So obviously we're receiving the presentation today. Staff will need to go away and look at the implications of that, particularly over lost revenue, and then either come back to a council meeting if the amount is substantial, or it's a decision that can be made by staff within their delegation.
Thank you. It just leaves it to me to thank you, Gordy, and you too, Buddy, for your presentation. I must say, Gordy, when I saw your name on my run sheet, I knew who you were, and I'm thinking, boy, that guy's free. So, but a good presentation, well done. And as I say, it will be a more a staff determination in this committee, just because of the next meeting after this one is actually after Waitangi Day. So thank you very much. Thank you for attending.
Sure. Thank you.
So the order of the items not on the agenda, there are none. The order of the business, it's as per the agenda at this stage, but with the flexibility to move if we need to. Any public excluded business to be transferred to the open, there is none. Having said that, we'll do the previous meetings first. Conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest from anybody? There being none, we'll move on from there. So the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 26th of August are on page 6 of your agenda. Would someone first of all move that they are a true and correct record, and then we'll go to matters arising?
Happy to move, Chair.
Moved by Mr. Thomas, seconded by Mr. Brunning. All in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Before I go to matters arising, the public excluded minutes on the 26th of August 2021 are on page 83 of your agenda. With the agreement of the committee and noting that the only business discussed in public excluded was to confirm the minutes, these can now be confirmed in the open. Would someone please move that be so? Councillor Thompson, you look as if you're happy to do it. And Councillor Thomas. All in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. So are there any matters arising out of the 26th of August minutes? Councillor Rose.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to quickly ask in regards to the membership of the minutes. It currently doesn't have Councillor Brunning in the members for Bay of Plenty Regional Council. Is that correct, or?
Councillor Brunning might be able to help me there. Are you a member of this committee? I don't think.
That's incorrect. Councillor Rose is quite correct, and there's an oversight, so that will be added.
Okay.
Committee advisor here, he wasn't present at the meeting, so he's not listed in the minutes.
So it's an apology for the meeting.
Without having attended one, yes.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for that clarification. Any further matters arising? Otherwise, we move on. We're right on the button for our run sheet timing. We move to page 19, the chairman's report. And I will ask, I think it's James and Jess. I'm looking,
Mr. Chairman.
James and Jess will be presenting that. Can I just say at the start of the chairman's report that I want to put a big bouquet to our council staff in the PT area. It's been a very frustrating and hard year with COVID as well as everything else. And then we did the refresh, the first refresh of the Papamoa Bay Fair services right at the time when Cameron Road upgrade is underway. So timing, has been hard, but the end of the day, and there's always a lot of talk about decarbonisation, and our challenge is to get people to use the bus. And I think, James, I'd like to commend you for that work on that refresh, and to Jess, because it's most unusual that in the middle of a contract you can actually save a substantial amount of money for the regional council in the contract, and that's the outcome of this first refresh. So that is you must be a too tough a negotiator for me, but if I need somebody, you're the go-to girl, Jess. So well done you, and well done James. And with that, I'm opening it up to you.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you for that acknowledgement, Andrew, or Chairman, I should say, sorry. So we're at page 20 of the agenda, and I will just be providing some updates on Waka Kotahi funding to start with, and then James will step in to talk about transport and urban planning updates, and then I will come back to talk about some public transport operations updates. So in terms of Waka Kotahi funding, we have some quite good news this quarter. You may recall from an earlier meeting that we were waiting for confirmation from Waka Kotahi around what funding Bay of Plenty Regional Council would receive for the living wage. So this year, Waka Kotahi confirmed that they would now fund the living wage to bus drivers, and they would support councils by paying the increase from the base rate that drivers were currently being paid to the current living wage. The issue for us was we were already paying the living wage, as our council decided to do that without funding from 2019. And so there was no increase for our council, and therefore there was no funding available to us from Waka Kotahi, as there was for other councils. So we expressed concern with this, and we expressed that we consider this to be unfair. And we've worked with Waka Kotahi for a few months now, and have asked for the increase from the base rate that was in place with drivers in 2019 to the current living wage. And Waka Kotahi have agreed to that now. And so from 1 July this year, we will receive funding from Waka Kotahi for the living wage, and that will be the increase from 2010, the base rate in 2019, to $22.75. So it's quite a significant amount. Waka Kotahi have included $3.6 million over NLTP 21-24. So that's in our continuous program. So that's approximately $1.2 million per year that we otherwise didn't have for something that we've been doing since 2019. So we're really pleased with this outcome, and we're thankful for Waka Kotahi for working hard behind the scenes to achieve this additional funding for our council. The other update is around COVID costs. So Waka Kotahi have agreed to continue funding to 31 December this year, the fare revenue shortfalls from COVID, in addition to COVID cleaning costs and other health and safety measures that we're having to implement across all of our operators during the various moves through alert levels, and that will continue under the traffic light system as well. I'll pass over to James for the transport and urban planning update. James.
Thank you very much, Jess. Firstly, Mr. Chairman, I'd be very grateful for the kind words that you've expressed. It really does mean a lot to both myself and staff that you express your thanks for the work in what, as you say, has been a very challenging year. So I really do appreciate that. Just before I get into the transport planning update, I would like to briefly introduce 3 new members of my team. So we have Vonnie Archibald, who has joined as a program manager. So she has an overview of all of our projects and programs across both transports and urban planning. We have Oliver Haycock, who has just joined us from the UK. Ollie is a public transport specialist. He'll be a team leader, and you'll get to know Ollie very well in future public transport committee meetings over the coming months and hopefully years. And also Matthew Kilpatrick, who's just joined Regional Council from Becker here in Tauranga as a senior transport planner, working in the Transport and Urban Strategy team. So welcome to you 3, and hope you enjoy this PTC meeting. Also very much appreciate the efforts of both my staff and those of the Public Transport Operations team. The bus network refresh was a great joint effort, and we look forward to many more examples of that in the coming months and years. In terms then of the Transport and Urban Planning update, I've got 3 short items for you. The first of those is the Regional Public Transport Plan, which is progressing very well. We had a very constructive workshop with councillors in October, which provided some really good feedback on the vision and objectives for the RPTP. And yesterday, we had a very successful workshop with the public transport operators, who are ultimately responsible for providing the services that we come to rely on. Their views are really important for the RPTP policies and understanding how those affect delivery on the ground. And then in mid-December, we have a further workshop with councillors to start getting into more detail on some of the policies, including, for example, fares, which has been an active debate today. So RPTP progressing very well, and we're still on track to produce the final document by the middle of next year. The next item is the Travel Demand Management and Behaviour Change Project. That's also progressing very well. So on page 21 of your agenda pack, you will see there is a diagram there which summarises some work undertaken by WSP to highlight the broad range of travel demand management strategies that we are looking at in the Bay of Plenty. No real surprises in there, and the key challenge now is to turn those strategies into actual actions on the ground. And to that end, we are commissioning consultants across the 3 sub-regions of the Plenty, so Eastern Bay, Rotorua and Western Bay, to actually provide those 3-year action plans. So that's a really important piece of work, because we need to start taking some decisive action to address the challenges of single occupancy car use that we currently have. The last item, and by no means least, is the Wednesday Challenge project, which at the moment is our biggest investment in the travel demand management space. So councils, that's ourselves and Tauranga City, with Waka Kotahi, have jointly funded this project, and the setup is well underway. So there is a website which you can go to, which is www.wednesdaychallenge.co.nz. Well worth looking at. It's a very nice website. There is a launch event taking place on the 15th of December down at the Historic Village, and the programme will formally launch at the start of the new school year on the 31st of January next year. So a lot of preparatory work is currently going on, and I've been very impressed with the level of energy and enthusiasm from the Wednesday Challenge team. And also in particular, a big shout out to the Tauranga City Council Travel Save team. I think have been really, really helpful in terms of helping the Wednesday Challenge folk to understand the realities of life on the ground, particularly when it comes to transporting or getting children to travel around the network. So Travel Save team, TCC, certainly deserve a big bouquet from me as well. So that's just a brief update on transport and urban planning matters. Happy to take any questions at the end.
Let's take questions if there are any where you're up to there. Just before you do that, just recognising that the plan is to stop for a quarter of an hour for coffee have a break at 10:30-ish. So we'll work around that, and we're hoping, because I never said it at the beginning, but our aim is to wind this meeting up by about 12:30. That's the schedule. So cup of tea at 10:30-ish. We'll work around where we're up to. So any questions to either Jess or James or staff? I see one there. Commissioner Selwood.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, James, for the report. I'm interested in the travel demand management report, and the strategies identified are very consistent with what you would expect. And I guess the engine room is the actions. And my question is, under the actions for travel demand management, is road pricing seen as a significant potential contributor to behaviour change? And is that included in the work programme?
Thank you. Through the chair, I would certainly suggest that road pricing has to be actively considered as a demand management tool, not only here, but across the large urban areas of New Zealand. I think in terms of the TDM programme in the Bay of Plenty, our immediate focus is on looking at free car parking and extensive free car parking, and understanding how the TCC parking strategy will assist in providing the signals necessary to promote that shift from single occupancy private car. But yes, we do have a longer term eye, and demand management through some kind of pricing, in my view, it's just a personal view, not certainly one of the council, is that has to be, considered in the mix with all the other policy levers that we have. So we'll be looking very closely at any work that's going on either at a sub-regional level here or at a national level to understand how things might work in the Bay of Plenty.
Thank you.
Councillor Rose.
Kia ora kōrua, ka mihi nui ki a koutou, e te kaimahi. Look, I just wanted to express my congratulations, particularly around the living wage funding. It's good to see at the bottom of that section that now all contracted bus drivers across the region are paid the living wage. It is very good to see that. I know that that's something that's been fought for a long time now, and it's good to see it finally cross the line. Mr. Chair and staff, are we discussing the bus refresh and that yet, or is that next? Can I ask questions on that?
Let's just hold your thoughts on those. We're just working, that will come up, but we're just working our way through the agenda. Thank you.
Oh, kei te pai. All good.
Councillor Nees and then Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I've got two questions. One's regarding the travel demand strategies, and the other is on the security contract for Tauranga CBD and Greerton. With regard to travel demand, what part does marketing and promotion play in this? Is it considered a strategy, or is it going to be an implementation action? I ask because in changing mindsets, we need to get people to be considering public transport as cool, convenient and cost effective. And we need a really excellent marketing strategy, not just an advertising strategy, but a real marketing strategy that is targeted to get the mind shift and the behaviour shift. So where does promotion and marketing play in your strategies, James?
Thank you, Councillor Nees. Through the chair, it's absolutely crucial to everything we do. I think a lot of public transport operators and providers over the years have been guilty of thinking, provide something and they will come. And we don't give enough thought collectively to the marketing, the publicity, the incentivisation, which is absolutely critical to everything that we do. In a later paper, we're going to be talking about the proposals for the bus network refresh in Rotorua. And as part of that paper, we have set out some broad ideas about the sorts of marketing and publicity initiatives that we could actually look at doing. So it might be worth coming back to those in that paper and seeing what people think about them. But in answer to your question, bluntly, it should be BAU. You know, this is something we should just have in our DNA.
Thank you. My other question is with regards to the security contract in this, for the Tauranga CBD. And it's actually a question for Commissioner Selwood. In our recent annual plan workshop, we had a consideration put forward by public transport staff and Rotorua Lake staff for the regional council to also contribute to the security costs for the bus network in Rotorua, because they felt that we were doing it in Tauranga. So why should we not do it in Rotorua as well? Part of the discussion was around that this has traditionally been the role for the territorial authority. They provide the bus infrastructure. It's about security within the city. And rather than us leaping straight to saying, yes, that we would do a third with Waka Kotahi, taking over a greater percentage of the costs in Rotorua, the question was, why do we not go back to Tauranga City Council and ask them to reconsider their position that they won't contribute to the security contract? Just highlighting that other local authorities do regard this as their lane, their business, and we would very much welcome you contributing to the cost of that contract so that we don't have to change our strategy across the rest of the region.
Commissioner Selwood, invite you to comment if you'd like.
Yeah, thank you. This matter has been considered recently when the issue came up some months back by TCC. Our view still remains quite clear that we see this as an operational issue, that Tauranga City provides, if you like, the hard infrastructure, whilst the Bay of Plenty Regional Council or Regional Council generally provide the service operational aspects of the provision of public transport. And there's always a difficulty here when you draw a line. And, you know, we do face significant costs associated with the provision of the infrastructure, the hard infrastructure. We are behind the 8 ball. And we need to invest significantly, and we've provided for that in our long-term plan. So our view still remains and holds that the provision of security services is an operational matter. It's a decision made by the regional council on good grounds that they can provide security to their passengers. We understand that. Security has not been a priority from an infrastructure perspective, but it is from a service delivery perspective for the regional council, and therefore we think that's where the costs lie.
Thank you. We're going for Councillor Thompson, then Mayor Webber, and then Mr. Thomas in that order. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the report. In terms of the TDM strategies, James, a question to you. Have you done the constraints, barriers, risks to each of these strategies? And I'll just give you one example. You know, you're wanting to create a new culture. Yeah, well, good luck with that. So where is the analysis around what the barriers, the challenges, etc. might be in regards to each one of these strategies? Has that been done?
Yeah, sorry, through the chair. Yes, we have certainly done a lot of background research into the reasons why people do not choose to use modes other than the single occupancy private car. And when you look at the research, it's pretty much consistent across any area you look at in the world. There are certainly perceptions around the fact that it is far more convenient, safe, and pleasant to use a car. It provides an element of personal freedom that I think we'd all agree is something that is, unprecedented in the history of transport. And we've had 50, 60, arguably 70 years of the car progressively becoming interwoven into all of our lives, and that's not going to be unwound in 5 minutes. So really the idea of our TDM approach is to get that understanding of people's lifestyles, how the car fits into those lifestyles, but understand what actually are the increasing disadvantages of using a car, which are around things like congestion, greenhouse gas emissions, and increasingly safety. You'll often find that parents at schools complain about traffic outside particular educational establishments, but then will think nothing of driving themselves past other schools that are not actually part of their local community. So it's really a question of discussing on a very honest basis with everyone about how things could be better in the future, and reimagining what we're actually trying to achieve in our communities, making them less car dominated. And you have to look at the Jazz Festival in Tauranga a while ago, when streets were closed and people were thronging around in the pre-COVID lockdown days, to see that actually these sorts of areas can be absolutely superb places to be when cars are not actually there. So it's getting those kinds of thinking moving that we're looking at doing through this project.
Good luck.
Thank you. We'll try.
Mayor Webber.
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, further to Councillor Thompson's comments, which I fully agree with. Be careful about getting involved in marketing programs. They're normally the last thing you do. First of all, get a marketable product that you can actually sell to someone, and also identify the other cost options where it's cheaper to bring a car into town and park in very reasonably priced car parks than run a bus. We haven't even addressed the fundamental issues yet. So don't start jumping into marketing programs until we've sorted the fundamentals out. I just recall with these fundamentals we've been talking about for 12 years now that I'm aware of. So like Councillor Thompson, good luck.
Thank you.
You're so right, Mayor Webber. I had a look at the public transport review in 2007, and we really haven't shifted we were talking about it then, and for mode shift change, and we really haven't shifted the dial substantially since 2007. So if you keep doing the same thing, expecting a different result, then you might be very
Absolutely. And one thing I would add to that, Chair, is the costs we have incurred in executive time and councillor time, and we haven't shifted the dial. What's the merits of what we're doing?
Exactly. Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Thank you to Councillor Nees for raising the issue around security at bus stops and the ability of who pays what. I would like to say that Rotorua would love to see some financial support from Regional Council in terms of security around our bus stops. However, we have gone ahead. We see our public safety as a holistic issue, and we don't really separate the issues of safety around our buses and especially bus stops from any other safety issues, especially in a city. And I suppose, although Rotorua doesn't really have a security problem any greater than any other city, our local media seem to highlight issues on a regular basis. So we may be more, we may be a little bit more concerned about showing our public that we are looking after them. But we definitely would like to see some help from Regional Council, even if it was just to signal that partnership between TLA and Regional Council on all these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Just
Chairman, May I
Sorry.
respond to that? It's Jessica.
Yeah,
Easton.
sure. Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. We have been working closely with Rotorua Lakes in terms of security funding, and I've been working closely with Waka Kotahi to try and obtain that 51% financial assistance rate that we were able to obtain here in Tauranga. Waka Kotahi have just confirmed that they will support funding in Rotorua as well. So I'm now just working with Rotorua Lakes around the costs of their security. As you say, the security in Rotorua that's currently provided is citywide. It's not just seen as an interchange issue. So we're just working through that and what that looks like. But yes, certainly the funding discussions are progressing well.
And
Thank
through
you.
you, Chair, thank you so much. That's fantastic news.
Yeah, I was just going to say that both Tauranga and Rotorua are at this stage 100% targeted rate. So it has been funded by the ratepayer basically, but it's great that Whakakotahi are coming into the mix. Well done. There'll be no further questions. That section, let's move on, James.
I think actually it might be Jess next, is it? In terms of the rest of this report, the chairperson's
Yes, that's me. So this is just some updates in the public transport space. I won't talk about patronage during the chairperson's report. I will talk about that in our next report in the agenda. Western-based school services. So we continue to see growth in our school services, and we're still dealing with capacity issues. So next year we'll be adding another 3 vehicles to the school network. Which is really positive. It's great that we're seeing such fantastic uptake, particularly during COVID times. It's going against all the trends that are happening across the country. So yeah, three new services there. The other update was on the bus network refresh, which has been mentioned. So that was implemented on the 15th of November, and that optimised the network between Te Puke, Papamoa, Bayfair, the Mount and Tauranga. We've had really good feedback from the community around that service, particularly from residents in Papamoa East, who now have more frequent services and a much more direct service into town. And we did receive some feedback from some customers saying that the trip from Papamoa East is now faster on the bus than in their car, which is really positive and what James's team were hoping to achieve. The other aspect which Chairman has mentioned is that the work resulted in a contract reduction of $870,000. So not only have we achieved some great results in terms of optimisation, but we've also seen that contract reduction. The other update was around the accessibility concession. So during this quarter, we also implemented the accessibility concession, and this has had really huge uptake and a great response from our community. We've seen in the first quarter 9,601 accessibility trips taken by 470 concession holders, and that averages out at 18 trips per user over this quarter, which is a fantastic result. We've been out in the community working with local organisations, helping to set people up with their B cards, taking buses out to different communities so that they can practice using the B card, getting on and off the bus, and it's been a really positive project to implement. One thing that has been highlighted though, and we have seen a number of complaints come through around infrastructure, with the increase in passengers on using the accessibility concession, there have been some issues, particularly around Farm Street, where there's not enough space for someone in a wheelchair to get off the bus. And so we're just really working closely with Tauranga City Council around how we can improve the infrastructure around the buses so that our passengers can safely get on the bus and disembark the bus. The last thing that I wanted to note was just the security services contract. So we ran a procurement process now that we have secured funding from Waka Kotahi for that permanent service in Tauranga. Waka Kotahi are contributing 51% to that, as I mentioned before. So the successful bidder was Allied Investments Limited. They commenced in November. and that's been rolled out in a very positive way, and we're continuing to monitor that with Allied and adjusting security as needs require across Greerton, Bayfair, and down at Willow Street. The other positive thing from that tender is that we were able to secure the living wage for all of our security guards as well. So yeah, another positive aspect arising from that procurement. And that was all from me. So questions?
So questions, Councillor Rose.
Kia ora koutou, ka mihi nui. Look, I just want to say, as a bus user and as someone who did travel over to Mount every day, the new bus refresh has been an absolute success. Being out there, out and about, and hearing just the positivity around the actual bus refresh has been, it's been really good. And actually, I think staff should be really proud of what you guys have done, and the new system and how it is working at the moment is really good. I just wanted to ask a question in and around an issue around the hospital, because obviously with the bus refresh, that got rid of the hospital link and the city link. Is there any plans to potentially look into making either the number 5 or the 2W or 2B head to the hospital again? Or is that out of the question? Just because that's probably the one set of complaints I am receiving is people in the Mount, Papamoa and Papamoa East who work at the hospital are now unable to get to Mahi without transferring at Willow Street. So is there any potential to potentially review that decision, or is that something that might be a bit difficult?
Thank you, Councillor Rose. Through the chair, yes, I think it is worth emphasising the fact that as a result of the hospital link being withdrawn, that direct service from Bayfair and the Mount through to the hospital is no longer operating. When we looked at the levels of usage just prior to the changes, we found that it was relatively low, about 150 trips per month. And part of the problem with the hospital link was that it actually only effectively operated in one direction. So although people could get to the hospital directly from the Mount, they could not actually get back without that transfer at Willow Street. So in answer to your question, yes, we are certainly interested in looking at the possibility of the 5 being extended to the hospital to provide that direct link, which would actually be in both directions and would actually make it much more attractive. So as part of the phase 2 refresh, which we'll talk about in another paper, that is something that we will revisit. The concern we had previously from the operators was the proposal to extend the 55, which obviously starts in Ahoiti and goes all the way through to the CBD, and the proposal to extend it then further to the Mount and Bayfair was opposed by the operators because they were concerned, I think, reasonably about the levels of delay that were likely to ensue, particularly on Cameron Road and also in well-known areas like Totara Street. So maybe the solution is to look at that shorter route from the hospital to Bayfair via the Mount, and we will consider that as part of phase 2.
Thank you. Any further questions? It then leaves me I will move the recommendation on page 19 that we receive this report, seconded by Councillor Rose. Any discussion? There being none, all in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Okay, we're now at 10:24. I think we'll try to get through the Arataki report before we have morning tea, unless there's would people rather stop now or let's get through this last report? Keep going? Yep, let's keep going, Jess. Or whoever, yeah.
Through you, Chair, I have Simon Bell who will be presenting the Arataki report with me this morning. Simon, are you there?
Morning, yes, I am. Morning, Mr.
I'll
Chair
hand
and
over to you.
councillors. Thank you. I'll make this as brief as possible. We're not doing a deep dive. It's literally just a handshake into the report, which is part of the agenda. So I'll just share my screen here. If the technology plays the game, here we go.
While Simon brings that up, we're at page 25 of your agenda. And then the Arataki report itself starts at page 29.
Okay, can you all see that screen there?
Yep.
Excellent. Okay, so as I said, it's not a deep dive, but we'll do a once over lightly as we head into morning tea. But basically, I think it's been called out a couple of times before. The key factor this quarter was COVID and the significant impact on the patronage. So Q1 saw 535,000 trips taken across the region, which is down 28.3 on Q1 last year. And you can see from this chart to the right of the screen, the yellow shaded area is the very significant impact caused by level 4 and then level 3. So we had a 95% dip overnight, basically, and that went across 21 days while we were under level 3 and 4. But then we did have a very quick recovery back up to around 80% of normal daily usage, and that was pretty much reflected across all regions in the country. And notably, in the last 7 days of September, we hit 90% of pre-level 4 lockdown patronage, which is pretty amazing, given the we're still in level 2. People are a bit unsure about traffic lights and so on and so forth. So that was pretty encouraging. And you can see on the bottom right hand there, we're tracking very closely indeed to similar councils, Otago and Waikato. I do have to call out a correction in your Arataki report, which I unfortunately can't see the page reference at the moment. Jen, you might be able to jump in.
Page 32.
32, thank you. I had that at the ready, but my technology is not letting me see it, unfortunately. The total column on the far right-hand side was incorrect. It was hard-coded, unfortunately, in the base document and had slipped down a year. So these are the correct numbers, and I can share that later on through a revised Arataki or through the minutes of this meeting. I also want to call out some PT Arataki improvements. These are step changes. We're hoping to go a bit further with these over time, but just for this month, this quarter, sorry, we've introduced some rolling trend charts for each of the key areas around the region. And we're highlighting COVID because clearly that's an ongoing problem and provides a lot of context around what's driving trends at the moment. So we've introduced those. You'll find those at the bottom of each of the pages throughout the report. And then also we've introduced some top and bottom route information into the, sorry, I'm just jumping around there, into the key routes as well, key regions as well. And what we're trying to do is call out sort of more deep dive information, more useful and pithy information for decision making. And that's all around the passengers per trip, number of trips run, and then the utilization, which basically means how much of the average trip is are bums on seats. So you can see there in Tauranga, which is the only region we've rolled it out for so far, just because you have the information at hand. Route 55, you've got 29.9% occupancy, basically. So that's some pretty useful information, and we're able to do that now that we've got RITs rolled out across most of our buses. And we will be providing that information to across Western Bay of Plenty and Rotorua and Eastern Bay of Plenty shortly, hopefully for next Arataki. We also want to come up with the same view, but with a time perspective, so peak versus off-peak. So we can see which buses are running full and which aren't. So moving forward, just touch lightly on customer experience. We had 3,800 transport recalls received into our call centre, which is amazing. It's 36% of all calls received, so that includes pollution calls, rates, complaints, all those sort of things. So yeah, that's some very high volume. A lot of those are around timetable queries rather than complaints. So, and after hours, TCC received another 1,300 calls. So people are engaging with our call centre really well. Complaints per 10,000 boardings, trending along as expected. Rotorua looks like it spiked up in September there, but a bit of context, that's quite a low number of complaints per 10,000 boardings, really. It just looks like a spike, and it's probably to be expected given the issues with the state highway upgrade and the traffic issues. Total mobility and accessibility, Jen alluded to that earlier. Sorry, Jess alluded to that earlier. Total mobility, we've had 14,000 passenger trips this quarter, which is down 8.1% on last year, but we noticed that this vulnerable population is particularly impacted by COVID, of course. And in a lot of the areas, this is their only means of getting around. Accessibility concession, Jess alluded to the fact that this has just been an amazing uptake. As she said, 9.6 thousand trips taken by concession holders. And notably, Kawerau, huge success. 7% of the total boardings in that area were from AC concession holders, which is amazing. Financial performance, I think we've got some finance staff on the call, so they can speak to any questions coming from this. But basically, operating revenue was down 1.2 million due to lost fare revenue due to COVID of 400,000. And Waka Kotahi's yet to confirm funding for the Western Bay of Plenty TSP and Rotorua's optimisation, a balanced approach, which James will speak to later on. And that resulted in lower than planned subsidies of $500,000. And finally, lower than planned fare revenue of 200,000. Operating expenditure was $900,000 down, primarily due to Western Bay of Plenty, which has a full year budget of 2 million and TSP, sorry, and Rotorua's optimisation balanced approach, which has a full year cost of 1.6 million, neither of which are yet to be funded by Waka Kotahi just yet. So probably will be further developments on that. There's potential for further cost savings as a result of the Tauranga optimisation, which is being negotiated with NZ Bus. Now that was at the time of writing. Clearly, Jess has mentioned the 870,000 savings, so that speaks to that. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. I've got questions from Commissioner Selwood, followed by Mayor Webber. Commissioner Selwood.
Sorry, my apologies, I was on the wrong screen. Fantastic to see the inclusion of the more specific data on patronage by route. And already you can see just in that tiny little box at the bottom of page 34 of the top 5 routes in the bottom 5 routes, that we have some information there that may start to enable us to get under the bonnet of why patronage is what it is and where are the opportunities we can improve it or reallocate our service priorities to deliver better service outcomes for our users. So it's great to see that. I think an understanding of patronage by route, by time of day is fundamental to the reallocation of the provision of bus services. I think we also need data on what is the revenue flow and what is the subsidy cost, because if we have that, we can start to then prioritise where the revenue or particularly where the subsidy goes. So I'm really pleased to see the start of that information coming through. To be honest, I'd like to see it as the primary piece of information rather than the little box down the bottom corner of page 34, but I think it's great to see that coming through. I just wonder, the same sort of information would be valuable for the before and after of the route change that has been done in Tauranga, and to what extent the information has been able to inform the decisions that are being made today on the new routes for Rotorua. Has this been data fed? Are the decisions and the route selections based on patronage data by route, by time of day? Because I think it's fundamental to all of the revisions that we're making to make sure that we're optimising the service. And that's my question.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I can jump in, Simon.
Thank you.
So we do use this data for planning purposes. So James's team are always drilling through all the data that we have to inform decision making for planning purposes, and certainly we will monitor the uptake of the bus network refresh in Tauranga. We'll report that back through the Improving the Network report to this committee, and it will help to inform the planning process and decisions for these next phases that we see across Tauranga. Thank you.
Thank you, Jess. Mayor Weber.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I'm in the same boat as Commissioner Selwood here. To me, this is the only page we really need to consider in this committee. We're monitoring performance, and it's really refreshing to see the data there. I think I'd like to see it one cut lower, but it's how you present it. What is the highest and what is the lowest, as well as the average, so you can get to see the timing of the routes on when your percentage is sitting. Any transport operator, this is the fundamental page they look at. It tells you, have you got the vehicle size right? Have you got the timings right? And the additional bit that I think we need to look at is origin destination of the routes to see, are we, you made a comment before about the hospital. The times for getting people to the hospital for workers at shift change. So they want to go there and leave there at that time, and also for the visiting hours. So I think to expand it out, and make it 90% of future meetings as the normal thing. Strategy is what you look at, and you need data to do that. I think this is a great step forward, and well done for finally getting there.
Really appreciate your comments, Mayor Weber. You're absolutely on the button. I've been advocating, and it's great to see the B card getting the information. You will be pleased to know that there was in the annual plan review coming up for the council, there is a request for an increased FTE, and we're very conscious of not incurring big costs to ratepayers. But the one priority that I said in the discussion on that, and it was only a workshop, so no decisions have been made yet, was that I 100% support an extra data analyst so that we've now got the data. Our staff need help actually analysing that data, and this is great stuff. So I agree completely. Any further questions?
Chairman, may I just add one thing to that, just by way of update? Thank you. So in addition to more focused resources in this space, we're also working with Waikato Regional Council to develop a program called Leapthorpe, which will essentially create automation for these processes. At the moment, we get huge feeds of raw data from the RITS systems, and staff are having to wade through that. And it's a very resource intensive exercise. So this program's really close to being finalised, and once we have that up and running, it will allow us to be more efficient in our approach to data. And then with the additional focus of resourcing from staff, we do hope next year we can make a lot more progress and bring you that data that both Commissioner Selwood and Mayor Webber have just mentioned then. So we hope to bring more improvements next year.
Commissioner Selwood, did you want to make another comment? Otherwise, it's Mayor Webber. Mayor Webber?
Thanks. Yeah, before we start trying to develop our own systems, might pay for the new data analyst to go and spend some time in the control room at Air New Zealand, Mainfreight, Fonterra, some of those places. They've been doing this work for Fonterra that I'm aware of 20 years, Air New Zealand for about 50 years. We shouldn't need to reinvent the wheel here. We should be able to take advantage of programs that have already been written by other people.
Good comment.
I can respond to that through you, Chair. It is the program we're using is one that's already in existence and being used across the country in the transport space. And so it's just been developed in terms of reading the RITS data. So it's not a brand new program that we've created. So yeah, we've certainly tried not to reinvent the wheel where we can avoid doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. There've been no further questions. I'm happy to move the report. Do I have a seconder? I think it's just receiving of, let me just check. Yes, it's just receiving the report on the, Mr. Thomas is seconding. Any discussion? All in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. So now it is 10:41. Can we have a quarter of an hour coffee break and come back at, shall we come back at 5 to 11, please?
Andrew, so I'm gonna take my leave if that's the case, because
sure.
No point in me coming back for 5 minutes. So
That's okay.
catch
Amanda, you're just sharing your screen. Ah, is that Torna who's sharing the screen? Amanda, do you want to let Torna know she's sharing her screen?
I can see the screen.
Thank you.
Someone had taken a screenshot or something.
Are you still there, Andrew?
It is now 10:55. Are we recording again? Thank you. I see Mayor Webber's got his hand up, but he's not at his screen. Just while we wait for him to come back, there's one administrative matter that we need to attend to. Councillor Brunning seconded the minutes of the previous meeting in August, and he wasn't attending. So if it's with your leave, I will become the seconder, and rather than Councillor Brunning, and we'll put that back to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried.
Excuse me, Chair, can we also just wait until we have a quorum of members with their videos on, please?
Oh.
Here we go. Thanks, Councillor Neath.
Okay, so we just redo the vote. So I'm seconding that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried.
Sorry, Chair, I did miss what you were voting on.
Councillor Brunning had seconded the minutes of the previous meeting, but he was not in attendance. So he could have done it pro forma, but it's better that it's somebody who's there. So I've just said I'll second it. Mayor Webber, have you got your hand up?
Yes, I have, and it's in regard to the previous conversation we just had about the data. I assume the vehicles we have got monitoring analysis running on them, on the buses, and we should be able to get from then what is the average speed that they're travelling at, and time at idle. And if you take that data and put it alongside the trip data, that getting back to that data, some of those vehicles that are travelling at less than 5% full, you'd be better to have all of those people in a car in terms of carbon emissions. And I think that's where you've got to get into some hard analysis to find out, are we chasing the right dream here? Because, you know, the reason for putting people into buses is to reduce carbon emissions. But if you've got the wrong size buses and you've not got them full enough, you're actually working against your dream. And I think we've got to get into that sort of data analysis, as well as how many bums on seats.
Thank you. A very valid point, Mayor Weber. Before staff might like to respond to that, but just to let you know that the current PTOM, which is the government requirement, is for the big buses only, and we're hoping that is going to be changed so that we can resize the buses. But right now that has still not been agreed to, although it's been considered. Staff, do you want to comment, James, maybe, to Mayor Weber?
Yeah, I can certainly make a general comment about the use of data, which is something that we are increasingly now doing, particularly in relation to patronage. I'm not an expert on the vehicle tracking. My understanding is that in theory it should be possible to use the Dynamis system that we have available to, in particular, look at where there are delays to bus services, because for us that's actually a key consideration, is where are the pressure points which enable buses to run on time, and therefore where priority may be needed in order to get those through. I think it's actually proven quite difficult to get that data into a form that we can actually analyse, and I believe that is something that's currently being worked on by colleagues in the public transport operations team, but I would need them to confirm exactly what the plans are, because it's not part of my area. So I think the challenge is, in principle, we do have actually a lot of data these days, but it's can we get it into a form which actually tells us something useful, which can then enable us to plan things.
No, so sorry, Chair. I'm coming from the engine computers in the buses. They will tell you what the revs per, when the driver's braking, when he's accelerating, what all of that sort of, taking that data, which is telling you the emissions as he's driving, and are we achieving the thing? So using the engine monitoring computerization that should be on these modern buses. I know in my past life the technology was available in 1998 and was used extensively then. So it should be available in buses in 2020.
Through you, Chair, we do have that data available, and so we receive that from the bus operators. And you're correct, that's in all the buses, so we're able to track speed and a lot of different factors and things that are happening in the bus. As James mentioned, it's really getting that data into a readable format that is easier for us to analyse against other data, and that's what we're seeking to make improvements on, and to increase our resourcing, which will actually allow us to do that, to have people here who can read that data and provide it to the planning team so that it's meaningful for us.
Thank you. So we're moving on then. Is Tauranga City, are they in attendance and ready for their update?
Yes, I am online.
Brendan, welcome. And it is, we look forward to getting your presentation, which is about the infrastructure and projects update. The floor is yours, sir.
Okay, thank you. I'm just trying to get my screen to show. Can you guys see that or not?
Not yet. Maybe if we can't see you either, though.
No, unfortunately where I am, I don't have a camera that is working, but just let me For some reason, I have lost my mouse, so that's my main issue that I've got at the moment. Here we go. Can you now see that?
We
Yes.
can.
So which screen can you see? Is it the one that's showing the PT presentation?
Yes, we can see the, now we've got it in slideshow.
Okay, brilliant.
Perfect.
Apologies that it took a while to get that going. Look, thank you for having me along. This should only take about 10 minutes. It's a really high level summary of just the funding that TCC have got in the LTP just for PT infrastructure. So there's about 3 or 4 slides. So if you're comfortable, I'll just quickly go through those, and then I'm absolutely happy to take any questions at the end. That might be the quickest way, and I can go back to any slides that you think you want to have a conversation about.
Thank you. That sounds fine.
Okay. So look, in terms of, we have a number of projects over the next 3 years, and some of them are specifically PT funded, and I'll talk through some that have a reasonably large PT component to it. So I'll quickly go through those. So in terms of the next 3 years, so Council has funded 2.5 million per annum over the next 3 years, specifically to target putting in new bus shelters, as well as upgrading all of our bus stops to provide better facilities at the stops, but also to look at disability access and also access across the road. So, I mean, as you guys will be aware, a lot of our bus stops are on, busy arterial roads, and it's fine in the morning. You might be on the side of the road where you can get to the bus stop, but then when you come home in the evening, you've still got to try and cross that busy road. So what we're looking to do is look at pedestrian islands, etc. And so we've got a consultant underway on that project now. He has just delivered the first half of the bus shelter locations. So we've split the project into 2 components. One is the remedial work. So we're looking to put that out potentially to our maintenance contractor, or we may go out to as a separate contract. So that will be just simple things like replacing bus stop signs, putting in hard stand between the curb and the footpath. In some cases, actually putting in a connecting footpath to allow people to get to the bus stop. But the other thing that they're doing is we've asked them to go away and look at all inbound stops and to come up with a location for a bus shelter. And so we will then approach those individual property owners and request permission for those shelters. I'm not expecting that 300 people will be happy to have a shelter. So we will likely look to have a hearing at some stage early next year to put those through to comply with the Local Government Act requirements. So in terms of the other work that we've got coming up, the Cameron Road Stage 2 project, so that is from 17th through to Barks Corner. So we are looking to go to the market for a consultant this side of Christmas, closing in February, and the intent is that business case will get underway in the new year. So the ideal timing is that it could go back to back with stage 1. So as stage 1 construction winds down, potentially we'd be in a position to start stage 2. The other big projects that we've got coming up is 15th Turret and Welcome Bay Road business case. Now, Welcome Bay has been included because we are looking at the possibility of putting PT infrastructure from effectively the underpass through to the shops, because one of the big issues we're acutely aware of is that buses just get caught in that slow moving traffic stream, particularly in the morning peak. So that business case will look at that potential as part of the overall project. We're also underway on the Arataki interchange business case, and consultation with the community is expected. It's sort of getting underway now, and that will carry through to early in the new year. The Hewlett Road sub-area business case is going to be undertaken in association with Waka Kotahi. So the point of entry has been approved for that project for Waka Kotahi funding, and TCC are actually co-funding that study. So there is TCC funds being put into the business case. The other project we have coming up is what we call the Area B Innovating Streets, and that really covers Matua, Otumotai, Bellevue, Brookview, and Judea. And it's looking at walking and cycling facilities, and it connects up to the Cameron Road. So effectively it will form the loop. But the reason I'm raising it is probably about half of that route is also key PT routes. So we'll need to look at how do we provide both walking and cycling facilities and PT routes. That project is going to market this before Christmas. The point of entry is approved, and again, hopefully we will be underway with a consultant in sort of February, March. So in terms of over the next 12 to 18 months, we have some physical construction that may impact on PT services. In particular, the projects that we've got coming up is the completion of the Monganui Road project. We did stage 2 in the last, probably about 6-8 months ago, the last stage finished. So we're about due to start stage 1 by the Mountain College. So that will start early in the new year. And then we've got stages 3 and 4, which take us back to Zespri. So that will then complete that project. So it's likely that there will be construction along that corridor probably from March through till ideally we'll be out of there sort of by end of October next year before the next summer season. As you'll all be aware, Cameron Road Stage 1 is currently underway and is expected to be still finished in late 2023, subject to a whole lot of things like COVID, etc. But assuming we don't have any further lockdowns, yeah, we're on track for 2023. We have a number of low cost, low risk projects spread across the city. I think we've got something in the region of about 50 projects in the low cost, low risk funding pot. Some of those will be on intersections that will obviously have PT routes through them. So we'll be working with regional council staff as they develop and as we sort of start looking at those in a bit more detail. The other thing that does have an impact in terms of PT is there are a number of CBD projects coming up. Some of these are TCC projects, others are actually the private sector, but we're aware that they are impacting on streets in and around the CBD. Examples of those are the civic redevelopment, which will be where the Willow Street building and library is for TCC. We've also got the court building coming up. The Harrington Street car park site is up for redevelopment. Farmers is still underway. We've got potential developments down Devonport Road as well. So they all sort of create pressure on the network, which may have an impact, but we will endeavour to work through those as much as we can. It's difficult when they are private development because we just need to look at how we allocate the road space and allow people to move through the CBD. And that was it. So I'm happy to take questions.
So I have a hand up from Mayor Webber, followed by Councillor Thompson.
Yes, and thanks for that presentation. A couple of questions. Firstly, I can't see any line items in there for park and ride, which we've been talking about for 20 years. And the second one, I'm a bit confused as to why you need to go for public consultation on putting a bus shelter on council or Waka Kotahi land. Is that common practice? Because I'm not too sure the other territorial authorities that are alongside you in this regional group go to that level. We realise it's a need for public transport, so they just get placed there. You'll always have some opposition from the people's property, but the other 100,000 people, where do they sit?
Okay, I can answer those two questions if you like. In terms of the park and ride, they are still in the long-term plan, the key decisions for us is out of the PT business case that is likely to get underway in the new year, that will start to give us clarity around the way the bus system is configured to work in the future, and then that will finalise the sites, etc., for the park and ride and a whole lot of other PT infrastructure that we have got budgeted. So it sits outside probably the next 18 months to 2 year period, but it's still definitely allowed for and budgeted, so that it hasn't gone away. It's just I haven't shown it because it's not in the next immediate sort of 2 year period. And that's just because we need that data that will come out of the PT business case.
But if I could just supplement you on that very point, if you'd bought the land, regardless of where it was 10 years ago, you've actually got the land bank in place, so that if you want to shift it somewhere else, at least you've got some capital recovery. The longer you put it off, the higher your input, your initial capital cost will be. You know, the reason some other councils bought the land 10 years ago was to land bank it so we could shift it around if we wanted to. Had TCC thought of that?
Look, I'm not able to comment. I've only been here sort of 18 months, so I'm not sure why. I agree. I'm not sure why land wasn't potentially purchased, 10 years ago. It would have been significantly cheaper, but yeah, I'm unable to comment on that, unfortunately. In terms of the bus shelters, there is a requirement under the Local Government Act. So we are required to approach a private landowner and request their permission to install a shelter outside their property. And under the Local Government Act, if they object to that shelter going in, there is a requirement in the Act to hold a hearing. So that's the process that we are following. So unfortunately, in the past, that's probably been why TCC has not delivered as many shelters as we would have liked, because we often get probably half of the shelter locations do get an objection. But the intent is that we will go out, consult on all 300, and then, to meet the requirements of the Local Government Act, we will need to hold that hearing to have that then approved by commissioners.
Councillor Thompson, followed by Commissioner Selwood.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Brendan. And through you, Chair, there are, to my knowledge, at least 4 very, very significant projects that are going to affect the Otamotai, Matua, Brookfield, Bellevue, Judea areas, including the Area B project you've talked about, the bus refresh, which we're about to talk about, the intensification work, Plan Change 26, and of course, considering the new bus interchange for Brookfield. So my question is, as an elected member, with obviously a deep interest in the area in which I reside, how can I be assured that there is going to be a very integrated approach to all of these matters, and that community will be front and centre in terms of engagement and having voice and choice in the design, formation and structure of their places? But my real issue is I want to be assured that there is going to be an integrated approach, clear accountability, so that I, as an elected member, can, on behalf of constituent residents, actually contact a person or persons who can help me through what I think is going to be quite a mire. Thank you.
I can cover off that first question. So it will definitely have to be integrated. So what we're going to do under the Area B study is there is some funding in that area for Brookfield, etc. So we'll look at them as a package of work. It doesn't make sense that we sort of have multiple projects in the one area. So we'll bring them under the one umbrella of the Area B. In terms of the actual development of those proposals and what the ultimate solutions will look like, that will need to be carefully worked through with both regional council staff, because there is a direct impact on bus routes on part of the route that potentially, the cycling facilities will go on. And then that conversation with the community, because I'm very, very conscious that we are also potentially creating a scenario where we've got walking and cycling PT facilities, plus roads that carry reasonably significant traffic volumes. And we've got some existing issues such as the Brookfield intersections, which we know struggle at peak times. So it's going to need a lot of careful, detailed planning to look at different scenarios, different potential combinations. And there will, at points, have to be some key decisions made around, if we don't have enough space, does one mode need to have priority to get through? For instance, at that intersection, we might be able to put the cycleway through another route, and therefore PT has to have priority. And so those decisions are going to have to be made as the project progresses. And I think as we pull all of the information together, it's not going to be straightforward, and it's going to be quite complex, because it's also a conversation with the community around, we need to create different mode space as well. And to create the space for these other modes potentially means that we can't have as much capacity, or we might have to take car parking away. There's those trade-offs that we need to just be able to outline, and then have that really honest conversation with the community. Is we don't have the ability to have everything. So therefore, from a community perspective, what's the desirable outcome? But then we'll have to have the lens over the top that sort of says, also from a network perspective, can we make that work? And that's where the complexity is going to come. And I think it's going to be quite interactive as we work our way through it.
Well, if I could just make a final comment, and thank you for that, Brendan. As a long-term resident over 35 years in this particular one of those suburbs, I can tell you that you're going to have, this will be enormously challenging. And for me, one of the greatest issues around community engagement is the transparency of the trade-off framework. So it's going to be a challenge in terms of engagement with community and actually that trade-off framework decision-making, which is so important. But certainly I will be following it with a great deal of interest, and I hope to see you at many of the public meetings that I will help you organise if needs be. Thank you.
Commissioner Selwood.
Thank you, Chairman. Really just going back to the earlier discussion around park and ride, and indeed our earlier discussion, I think, in the meeting around data and meeting customer needs. I think there's a real need for us to work hand in glove between Tauranga City Council and the Regional Council to understand what is driving behaviour at the outset. And we know that convenience is one of the reasons why people choose the motor vehicle. But I think we need a much more deeper understanding of what might trigger behaviour change, and whether the options of providing park and ride provide a more seamless opportunity to make passenger transport convenient, and design a system that truly meets customer needs, and then actively promote it. So it's going back to me Weber's comment about getting the product right in the first case. And I think there's certainly the Commission have discussed the possibility at a political strategic level of both TCC and Bay of Plenty Regional Council representative people coming together to really provide a governance oversight of that process for Tauranga City Council, or for Tauranga City. And this is where we're going to need the real evidence base to inform those decisions. Potentially that might work, Chair, as a subcommittee of this group or some other format. I'm not sure of the format, but I think what we're seeing consistently here is the interface between the provision of services and the provision of infrastructure is fundamental to the design of the service outcome. That users of the system need us to work in a totally integrated way, really, to your point, Paula, And I think we need to do much better than what we've done in the past in that regard, and that's requiring everyone to be very focused on the customer at the outset, and then how we can design a system that meets their needs. And I think that's the only way, we go back to our strategy of delivering bums on seats. That's the only way we're going to be able to achieve that, because what is very clear is that if we keep on doing what we've done, we're going to get the same results. And so we do have to change the way we think about this. And these are very difficult and complex decisions, and they impact the communities, they impact behaviour, they are highly controversial. And so joined up united leadership on those issues, I think it's fundamental. And these discussions we've just had just underline exactly those issues and problems and the opportunity of what's possible if we do get our act together.
Just be assured, Commissioner Selwood, that the regional council governance body is up to working collaboratively with you, and hopefully we can get staff doing the same, and we'll get some good outcomes for the city. Councillor Nees.
Well, thank you. I just want to thank Commissioner Selwood and welcome his words, because it's something that the Regional Council's long talked about, is working much more closely together to ensure that the customer's at the centre and we deliver the right outcomes. My question is around your parking strategy. I know you've done a lot of work on that, and I'm not sure, Brendan, whether I should be asking you or asking Commissioner Selwood about where you're at with your parking strategy. If you have made decisions on it, what is different to what you've had before, and what implications will that have for perhaps incentivising public transport use?
I probably can't comment in huge detail. I haven't been involved in the strategy. My team, though, is picking up development of the parking implementation plans that come out of the strategy. So we are looking at the CBD parking implementation plan with a desire to have that complete in March. So we had originally hoped to have it completed in February originally, so that it would dovetail with the end of the current 2-hour free parking trial. But the resource we need to use is unfortunately located in Auckland. So it's been another consequence of COVID that we've sort of had to delay, but we're now on target to try and get that CBD implementation plan sort of finalised for that March period.
I can just say, Chair, through you, at a high level, the strategy seeks to promote turnover of vehicles and discourage commuter parking. And since commuters are the primary target market for public transport, we're hopeful that by discouraging long-term commuter parking at either free or low charge, but encouraging turnover so that you've got the premises that we want to achieve at least a vacancy rate of about 15% in the CBD. The fundamental problem with the CBD is, I would argue, not so much the price, but the availability of parking. The availability is now very low. Apart from those really early birds who are really good at getting up early in the morning and coming in and stealing an all-day park from everyone else who might come into the retail centre to do some shopping. So we basically want to turn that around, and that is the essence of the strategy. So if we can discourage commuter parking and promote shopper parking, then we believe that we'll be able to achieve a better outcome that will work better for public transport, but also better for our CBD. Many of those trips for shopping are just a quick pop into the town, do your business and leave again. And that is what the car is ideal for. Not so good just coming in for a 10-minute shopping or a 30-minute trip and having to take an hour both ways to catch the bus. So it's coming back to the sort of customer focus kind of thing. If we can get the commuters onto the buses and then the shoppers doing the high turnover, high frequency. So the parking management plan will be all about achieving turnover and achieving a 15% free car park kind of operating model, so that you can pretty much always find the car park, but you'll only be able to stay there for a relatively short time. That's the broad intention. Have I got that right, Brendan?
Yeah, no, I think you have.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions of Brendan? It leaves me to thank you, Brendan, for your presentation. Always good to have you along at our meetings so that we know exactly what is happening within the city. We're all very interested stakeholders, and we do want to work collaboratively with you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you for having me attend.
All right, we move on to improving our network, page 50 in your agenda. And that's James, I think.
It certainly is, Councillor. Thank you very much. So just a couple of short items on the improving our network report this month. So the first of those, and hopefully I've successfully shared my screen, is provision of 2 new bus stops at the hub in Whakatane. And this is a really good collaboration between ourselves, Whakatane District Council, and very interestingly, the mall owner. And what it does do, I think, is nail the myth that shopping mall owners are not interested in public transport and don't believe actually that buses bring people into their areas, because they actually do. And the owners of the mall have been really, really helpful in terms of getting these bus stops provided very close to where people actually need to get to, which actually is really great, particularly for people with mobility impairment. So we're very, very pleased that these stops were formally introduced on the 15th of November. There is going to be, I believe, starting this week, a marketing publicity campaign to make customers aware that they can now actually get a bus right into the hub at Whakatane, which will hopefully encourage them to use the bus for those very, very important Christmas shopping trips in particular. So it's a really great news story, and well done to everyone who's been involved in that. The other item on the report is to do with the region-wide free school travel. So councillors will be aware that Regional Council's long-term plan committed to firstly implementing a 1-year trial of free bus fares for school children in Tauranga, that's at any time of day, and further implementing a 1-year trial of free bus fares for school children in Rotorua and Whakatane, based around school arrival and departure times. So those funding decisions have now been confirmed and will be implemented for the start of the new school year, which is Monday, the 31st of January 2022. Happy to take any questions or comments on either of those items.
Mr. Councillor Isles.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, thanks, James, for giving the recognition to the collaborative work that's been undertaken between Regional Council and Whakatane District Council, plus, as you indicated, also the hub owners. That is part, and I mean, that is a big piece of hopefully getting the connectivity for our residents from within urban Whakatane out into the outlying hub business centre. But at the same time, we're in the process during the course of this financial year of hopefully another 3 bus stops in Te Teko, another one out of the Ohope by the library, and then, of course, one also at the Taniatua School. So the bus stops are part of the project. And I think I'm just taking on board Councillor Thompson's concerns in previous discussions. It is now a matter of us making sure that we get out and sell the idea that we have these bus stops available and that we have these bus services that we would really like to see used as an alternative mode of transport. So a big ups to Regional Council. It is Whakatane District Council's first triennium on this committee, and we really acknowledge the support we've had. And I know I can speak on behalf of Mayor Turner by saying that, you know, we've really made positive strides. The other part that I want to touch on that James also made mention was the implementing the one-year trial for the school children. Hopefully, it'll be interesting to see the uptake on that and look as if hopefully that we can make it on a more permanent basis. Just going down to the routes that are outside of the geographic boundaries of Whakatane, for example, and there's a few routes there that relate to older tertiary students, and you know therefore they're not part of the free fares for school children. Is it likely that we can revisit these routes at a later date? That's my only other question, but other than that, a big thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Riles, and yeah, really again appreciate the collaboration we've had with your officers in particular. They're an absolute pleasure to work with. In terms of your question, look, we're always looking at opportunities to review fares and fare policies. The Regional Public Transport Plan, which I mentioned earlier, will be developing a whole set of new policies around fares, and in particular how we deal with different categories of people, whether those are socio-demographic or indeed geographic. So we will never say that we will not consider additions to fare policies and promotions. So it's something we will certainly review in the context of the wider RPTP work in the future.
Mayor Webber.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks for the report. Just going back to the earlier report on bar graphs on patronage, the more we move into free school buses or free, school buses or buses for educational purposes, if we could combine the one graph with two colours showing the free bus patronage, and on top of that the general public patronage, because I suspect we're growing patronage and declining our revenue, and make sure we're fully aware of the real data. By combining those two graphs together, you'll get a very different story, or I believe. Thank you.
Any staff response? Thank you. There been no further questions? Don't see any. Then we just have to receive this report. Can I have Councillor Nees to receive? Councillor Isles as a seconder. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Next report is the Transport Bus, Tauranga Bus Transport Refresh, Part 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this commences on page 54 of your agenda pack, and there are two recommendations. Firstly, that the committee receives this report, and secondly, we request approval of the proposed high-level scope of work that is contained within this report, and that is shown as an appendix on page 63. So following on from the success of the Part 1 refresh, we're looking now to repeat the trick with the rest of the Tauranga urban bus network. And we've already started to undertake some initial assessment of some of the issues and some of the data that is around now. So if you look at pages 57 and 58, there is a table there which shows patronage for the month of July. So that's just before the most recent COVID lockdown. And you can see the top of the charts is Service 1 with just over 10,000 trips in that month. And that goes all the way down to the 72 A and B, which are the two lowest patronised routes in that table. What is missing in there is a couple of other routes, which actually we should be considering as part of this refresh. And so those are the 51 and the former 57 routes. And the 51 is the one that essentially circles around the lakes area. Had in February 2021, which is the information I've got available, only 312 people, and the 57 only 14 in a single month. And those are clearly very low figures. We'll be coming on to a report shortly about on-demand public transport, where we can discuss that particular area in more detail. But I think the point we need to make here is that we're not particularly satisfied with these patronage figures. We feel on the basis of what we've done in the Part 1 refresh that we can and should be doing better, and that certainly is our intention with this particular piece of work. There are a number of key issues which we feel are leading to suboptimal outcomes, not only for our customers but also communities through which buses pass. So, for example, we don't currently have an all-day direct service from Tauranga Crossing and the lakes, which goes via Cameron Road and the hospital to the CBD. And that's quite a big gap in the current network. On the other hand, we have lots and lots of buses that are travelling around Matua and Otomotai in particular, where patronage levels aren't particularly high. Also in that area, we have a number of routes going in different directions on different roads, and sometimes those change between the morning and the afternoon, and that is actually pretty confusing for passengers. And as a previous resident of that area, trying to explain it to people is actually sometimes quite difficult. We've also, I think, previously discussed issues at Brookfield in terms of transfers between services, and also the need for some much better passenger waiting infrastructure in that area. So there's a heap of issues that we've got to look at as part of this refresh. As with the Part 1, the emphasis here is firstly on making better use of the existing funding we're putting into the system, not adding new funding. And secondly, as with Part 1, we won't solve every single problem that the bus network has in this area, but we will provide a much more stable footing for any future growth in services as we move forward into the business case phase. So in terms of the actual work, it's going to be fairly similar to that in Part 1. So we'll undertake a full network review and come up with proposals for changes to the routes, which are based on the data that we've outlined. We will then undertake an extensive public and community consultation exercise, as we did in Part 1, which was very, very successful in terms of the levels of engagement that we got and the quality of the feedback. And then once we've done that, we will come back to the committee with our proposed recommendations for changes to be implemented in the next phase of work. Also worth again emphasising that as part of this second refresh, we are going to be looking more closely at the legibility and quality of our publicity material, in particular the timetables and maps, and also looking at a more comprehensive marketing and publicity approach. So previous commentators are absolutely right. You do need a quality product which people can understand and have confidence to use. But we also need to make sure that those who are perhaps not aware of the benefits of buses and actually what you can do on the network, which is often a lot more than people think, that we have the publicity available to make people well aware that there is actually a choice, perhaps a bit more than they might imagine. So in essence, we are looking to repeat the success we've had in part one. In terms of timescales, with COVID and everything else going on, those necessarily have to be fairly fluid at this stage. We're mindful that these changes take an awful lot of work and planning, and implementation in particular is very, very time consuming. So a big shout out to the public transport operations team for their efforts on the phase one refresh. As I observe them from my desk, I can see how much time and effort they put in, not only during the day, but also evenings and weekends to get this stuff actually delivered. It's a phenomenal effort. So we have to be mindful when we are promising changes that we need to ensure we have the resources available to do those, and people have the time and space to be able to get on and do quality work. So ideally, we'd be looking at changes sometime towards the end of next year, but that will all be reviewed as part of the work we're doing to come up with a credible delivery programme. So that's really all I want to say. Happy to take any questions or comments.
We've got two councillors. First, Councillor Thompson, followed by Councillor Nees.
Yeah, thank you. And through you, Chair, in terms of the data collection phase, which seems to me to be pretty much by your timetable, not much further work is going to be done on that. Have I got that right? Because I would really like to see some drilled down information, not just the patronage data. And one of the reasons I say that is, at the risk of boring you all stupid, half of these services are, of course, in the western suburbs. And the western suburbs, like any suburbs, are unique. They have a number of elder villages and accessibility villages and persons with disabilities, and hence that was one of the reasons why the additional services were actually brought in after some very heated public meetings. So, James, my question is, I hope you're not just relying on patronage data without drilling down and actually really understanding what's driving what you might consider to be low patronage, but actually might be providing an incredibly important social mobility service for some of our demographic. That was my question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Through the chair, I can certainly provide reassurance that patronage data, whilst it's a really good start in terms of trying to understand what is going on, is only the headline. What we're really interested to understand is the value that the communities place on these services. And you're absolutely right, for people without a choice as to how to travel, and there are plenty of those around, these services are absolutely crucial. So what we're not looking to do is to simply undertake a sort of scorched earth approach where we look at the weakest parts of the route and just cull them without putting something else in place. That's not something we did in part one, and we have no intention of doing that in part two. But what we are looking to do is understand where perhaps we are over providing services in some parts of the network, and actually potentially reallocating that capacity to areas that are less well served. And we've actually started quite a deep dive into a lot of the data, not only through the B-card system, but also our Remix public transport software. And what that does is enable analysis of access through a 400 metre maximum 400 metre walk to a bus stop. So if we change routes around in terms of roads they serve, we can understand the differences in levels of accessibility. So we can be confident that if we do make a change, that the impacts are relatively small and actually might benefit other people as well. That with any refresh, there are going to be some winners and some losers in terms of overall levels of access. What we need to ensure is there are more winners than the losers, and the losers aren't left completely high and dry.
Councillor Nees, followed by Commissioner Selwood.
Thank you. I think you've, James, has pretty much answered my question. I was reflecting that in the previous regional land transport plan, we had some guidelines for when routes need to be reviewed, and particularly when patronage fell below a certain level, that there was consideration of whether or not we still provide that route. I just wanted some assurance that we were looking at the drivers of why some sort of service is required, as opposed to just the numbers of people using the service. And I think you've given me that answer. And of course, the on-demand trial might be the silver bullet to some of those areas. So thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Selwood.
Yeah, thank you. And I think the discussion is on the money. It's interesting. I just did a quick ad of each of the routes that serve Otamotai, Matua, Brookfield. And the total patronage of those routes is actually the equivalent of the Pies Pa in terms of total numbers. The difference being, obviously, it's being served by different corridors through those suburbs. Now, I'm not sure which is the best answer. It may well be that the lower patronage on the higher number of routes might be a better service provision than one corridor. It may be we are better to consolidate. And I think this is where understanding the drivers and the potential target market and how best we can reach them is fundamental to designing the routing. And thanks, James, for your reassurance that that's exactly the kind of approach that you are contemplating.
Thank you.
Thank you. One thing, James, that I noted, and you're talking about the lakes and the figures for February, and you add that to the Lakes Express, and then recognise that when we developed the lakes from scratch, one of the key drivers that we were asked to do by the city was to put a bus service in from day one, and so before the people got there, so there was a service operating, and it doesn't seem to have had the outcome that we were looking for. So there are lessons in history here that we need to take into account, but thank you for your work on that. We have 2 recommendations on page 54. I don't think there's any further questions. 1, to receive the report. 2, to approve the proposed high-level scope of the work contained in the report, including timetables. Do I have a move by Councillor Thurston, seconded by Commissioner Selwood? Any discussion? There being none, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, James. We move on to on-demand transport.
Seamlessly moving on to on-demand transport, which is very much related to the previous paper. So we commence on page 65 of your agenda pack. And before we get into the meat of the paper, it is perhaps worth reflecting on some recent data that has emerged from the on-demand public transport trial in Timaru. So in Timaru, Environment Canterbury replaced pretty much the whole of the existing fixed route bus network with an on-demand alternative. So just to be absolutely clear, in case people don't know, on-demand is where you have a booking system for a series of routes to take you from your home or a place near your home to a range of destinations within a fixed geographic area. So there is a lot more flexibility in terms of times, places where people are picked up, and indeed whether you're sharing your ride with someone else who may or may not be going in the same direction as you. On a fixed route, you all know where you're going all of the time. With on-demand, that's not quite the case. So interestingly, in Timaru, the first full year of the trial has seen levels of patronage increase from 147,000, which was the old fixed route network, to 171,000 on the on-demand trial. So quite a significant increase in patronage. However, it's also worth looking at the costs as well. So the old fixed route network cost $928,000 to provide per annum. So far, the on-demand trial has cost in the same period $1.854 million. So although there is a increase in patronage, that does come at a cost, and I think it is very important to recognise that fact in terms of thinking about the future. But nevertheless, I think it's fair to say that for a while now, Regional Council has been subject to a number of requests to consider an on-demand public transport trial. And so with that in mind, staff have done some initial work to look at potential options for a trial. And just to be clear, we're not saying today that we think we should go down this route and have a trial and fund it. Those conversations are still some way off. All we're looking to do today is raise the issue, discuss the concept that we've outlined, and hopefully seek your endorsement to do some more investigation work within existing budgets. So again, we're not at the moment asking for any further funding. That would have to be a committee decision and go through the usual regional council processes as well. So in terms of then getting to the meat of it, which is the trial area itself. So we discussed previously the concerns and problems we've had with the area around the lakes extending through to Tauranga Crossing and up through Pies Par towards Greerton. So the concept that we have come up with is an on-demand service that essentially covers that whole area and extends up as far as the hospital. So all the way up Cameron Road through Greerton. On page 68 of your agenda pack, we have a map which shows, broadly speaking, the potential area of coverage for the on-demand trial. Don't take those boundaries too literally. It's literally just to provide an indication of where the trial might go. And there are a number of reasons why we believe that this trial is worth pursuing. There are a number of areas of the lakes, particularly past areas of the network which are currently served by fixed route services, particularly Tauranga Memorial Drive, where there aren't any services and the large buses are not able to easily turn around. And so quite a lot of people have quite a long walk to be able to get on the fixed route service. We also feel this area has quite a number of attractive destinations for people to go to. So Tauranga Crossing Mall, the hospital, Fraser Cove, Greerton, and even places not even well served by existing fixed route public transport, so industrial areas like Malimi Street, for example. So we have a number of areas we actually think people would want to go to, which is clearly a key criteria in thinking about any new kind of service. And as previously mentioned, we have some fixed route services which, to put it mildly, are not performing in the way we'd ideally like them to. And so one of the options here as well is to replace those fixed route services with the on-demand service as a means of ensuring the costs are contained within what we consider to be reasonable boundaries. We're really as well very encouraged by, again, the attitude of the mall owners at the crossing, who we've been working with very closely to investigate getting provision of bus stops much closer to the entrance so that shoppers, and particularly again those without a car, can get in and do their shopping. The mall owners have been absolutely fantastic, but unfortunately we've had some issues with access onto the highway network, which means at the moment it's not possible to get full-size buses into that area and get them out again. But an on-demand service could do that because the vehicles are that much smaller. And of course, that's another issue that we keep being told about, that we have buses and vehicles that are too big. So this is an opportunity potentially to trial some different types of vehicles to see whether they actually provide the kinds of operating cost efficiencies and also, very importantly, customer needs and attitudes that we are told are things that perhaps some of our existing buses don't provide. There are options, for example, to look at provision of electric minibuses to make them much more carbon friendly. That's something that does come at a cost in terms of premium. So all of these issues are going to need to be looked at in order to come up with what we think is a sensible and cost-effective trial model. What we'll be doing as well is some significant engagement with communities who can understand their needs and also work with the tech providers. So the key issue here as well is how do you book an on-demand service? So if you just have a phone, that's not ideal these days. A website is the absolute minimum, but really to make on-demand very successful, you need an app, and developing an app that's easy to use and intuitive to use is going to be really critical to getting the levels of patronage that we would ideally like. So look, in summary, there's lots and lots of issues to work through, and I'm not pretending in this paper we've got all the answers to questions. That's the purpose of the further work. I guess what we are seeking today is some comfort that councillors are broadly happy with what we're doing and what we're proposing in terms of taking the investigations forward. And as I've mentioned earlier, at the moment, we don't have any firm view as to whether we'll want to do a trial at all, and if so, what type of trial. But if we don't investigate these things, we'll never actually get to some better solutions. So that's essentially what we're proposing to do.
Thank you, James. That's a really useful update, and it was very good to get your figures there, because I've heard how successful the Timaru trial has been. It has, I just did some quick calculations. It's increased patronage by 15.65%, but it's increased cost by 72.9%. So the average cost per trip in the first instance was $6.31, and the average cost per trip and with the on-demand was $10.91. So $6.31 to $10.91. So these are all things that absolutely have to be taken into account. Now, I've got three. I've got Mr. Thomas, Mayor Webber, and Councillor Thurston. Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Hey, thank you for your presentation, James. Good to see work being continued on this, and I am really supportive of it. Here in Rotorua, we're very keen to trial this sort of system. Obviously we've got real issues in Rotorua, and so we're needing to look at some innovative approaches. Just a couple of questions. I know that we had originally approved a on-demand trial from Kawerau, between Kawerau and Whakatane, I seem to remember, was delayed by COVID last year. I just want reassurance that that is still going ahead, and this Tauranga possible Tauranga trial wouldn't replace that. And then I think my second, and it's really just a comment, is it's clear to me from the other trials there have been around the country that different areas have different responses to these services. So I think it's important that even when we get results out of a Tauranga trial, that we don't just apply that to every other area in the region. It may be that different areas around the region are still going to have different responses. So most probably still necessary to look at trials in other areas. So that was my question and my comment.
Thank you. Through the chair, I can certainly provide reassurance that we're certainly not closed to the idea of looking at on-demand trials in other areas. The Kawerau example was one where, when we looked at the proposal, we firstly realised that a lot of the demands that trial would have covered has been essentially catered for by the improvements to the existing fixed route network 135, which has shown really good patronage increases since we've put those extra services on. And also Carrow wasn't at a point where we really had the technology solution that I think we ideally would have liked. So if we had our time again, I think we would be as we are now, much more aware of the practicalities and things we need to do to make on demand a success. And that's a key learning for us, and we're certainly looking to understand through this piece of work how we can actually then take it into other areas, which, as you rightly say, have very, very different needs. We are looking at the Eastern Bay, for example, in terms of a PT review following on from those in Rotorua and Western Bay. One of the challenges there will be to work with some really good community groups who've previously presented to this committee, the Eastern Bay Villages folk, who've got some great ideas for how we can make use of what are some interesting options for community transport, and also making good use of a lot of existing facilities, vehicles and drivers who focus on particular markets, but actually with a bit of coordination, we could get something a lot better for the money that's being put into it. So all of these things are going to be continuing. I'm really excited that we've got a work program over the next 12, 18 months that we can make a real difference in these areas.
Mayor Weber.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Be very wary, having lived in Timaru for 8 years, using that as a model. The CBD is in downtown, the industry is out at Washdyke, and you've got 4 main roads leading to them. We're a very different topography. We've got peninsulas. However, having said that, if you looked at it in terms of Timaru might relate to Bethlehem, might relate to the Matua Peninsula, then you've got a whole lot of on-demand services. But my real question about is, you're trying to determine the frequency of service for the people that need it. And it goes back to Councillor Thompson's comment before. The people in Matua that are rest home bound or whatever have a totally different demand than those that are going to work at the hospital. So it's a fit for purpose you're looking for. So it's frequency of service, and then the fitness for purpose of the vehicle you're using. And I suppose my real concern is, we have a 9-year contract. I don't know how many years to run on that is predicated on a particular vehicle size. What you're looking to do is a hub and spoke around an express type service. How do you get people to fill up those other express services, which is what you're talking about, the lakes? And I think we're better to look at the refresh thing. Have we got the right structure in place in the first thing with a hub and spoke? How are we operating our hub and spoke as opposed to service? And then how are we providing those social services for those in need, as opposed to the workers that are trying to get to work in volumes around specific times? And I don't know that our contract gives us much ability to look at alternatives, other than it'll rack up the costs because it'll be additional to rather than instead of. So I'd like to make sure that we understand the implications of our current contract and what we can do.
Thank you. Yes, through the chair, you're absolutely right. The current contract for the fixed route network does limit our flexibility to do things like changing the size of vehicles, which communities often want us to do. So the current contract doesn't finish until 2028. And so we are locked into the current provision of vehicles through that. But as we've shown with the phase 1 refresh, we can make better use of those vehicles in the areas that need them most, and then look at alternatives for areas where actually we think the larger vehicles may not be the most appropriate solution. So it is very much about understanding, as you say, those community needs, and also the topography, the geography, the highway layouts of various areas, and working out what is the best sort of service pattern for that. Now, the hub and spoke at the moment will always remain as being our overall operating concept, but the key challenge is to decide which routes are those that need that direct service. So in the Part 1 refresh, we identified the transfer at Bayfair from Papamoa passengers as being a blockage to greater patronage, and we've addressed that. Similarly, with Part 2 of the refresh, we'll be looking at other transfers and asking ourselves, actually, is there sufficient demand to make those services more direct? And where transfers are required, it's essential that the facilities at those transfer points are much better than they are now. We have really good bus priority so that buses are punctual, so they say they get there when they say they get there, and the transfer is minimised and people can have confidence in it. So there's a whole range of issues we've got to look at.
It's, my final comment, Mr. Chair, is I think that's the problem definition that you need to do, and I think the refresh and the on-demand are one and the same. And I think if you pick up Councillor Thompson's points about, if you looked at Matua, Bethlehem, Bellevue, all of that area as an area to look at it, where would on-demand fit in with the other hub and spoke type thing? So it's the problem definition and how you write the project scope around that. Because I think you're trying to bite off more than you really need to by going right across the whole district. Pick just because you've got more problems around the Matua Peninsula, Bethlehem coming in, how you pick up Brookfield and all of that sort of area, and then Otamote up to the Summit Road, Old Summit Road. Just look at that, because that's about the most complex area you've got to look at. If you fix that, then everything else is pretty easy.
Good comment. Councillor Thurston.
Thank you, Chairman. Look, I fully support the recommendations on page 65, the issue of much smaller buses and an on-demand public transport system has been on our books for as long as I can recall. But I recall one of the big drivers for this area came from Councillor Baldock and others in terms of we were trying to get the people in rest homes and the aged care facilities more mobile and much greater access to amenities. So for fear of being accused of ageism, which is an operative word at the moment, can someone assure me, James, that a lot of this trial will rely on a high degree of technology and the need for consumers to be pretty savvy in terms of use of technology? So I would hate to see the trial set up to fail if we're focusing on getting a lot of these less mobile folk greater access to our public transport system.
Thank you, Councillor Thurston, and through the chair, yes, we will be focusing on a range of channels for people to access the service. So it won't just be an app, and if you don't have a smartphone, that means you can't use the service. You know, the success of this has to be based on getting good access by whatever means people are comfortable with.
Thanks, James.
Councillor Brunning.
Yes, thank you. I have some difficulty with this. I think we need to stick to our core business, and you know, we really haven't tapped into the commuters. That's where our real problem with transportation is. I would rather see us concentrate on what we're doing rather than launching into something new. And just going to Councillor Thurston's comment about a trial, I didn't think this was a trial. I thought this was an investigation. So can you clarify, please?
Yeah, through the chair, I can certainly clarify that all we're asking for today is your guidance and reassurance, essentially, that we can continue with the investigation phase of a trial. But before we can commit to any implementation of a trial, we will need to come back to this committee. We will need to pursue through the annual plan process. And also, one last and very important thing that I was very remiss of not mentioning is the role of Waka Kotahi as a co-funder, and their views on willingness to help us fund a trial are going to be absolutely crucial to all of this. So so far, Waka Kotahi have proved themselves to be very open to discussions with ourselves around an on-demand trial. They provided us with a lot of really good information and collateral. They've got a really, really good and committed public transport team who actually understand not only planning but operations. So we need to work very closely with them. If we're not able to get funding from Waka Kotahi as their contribution through the NLTP, it's going to be pretty tricky to fund a trial at this stage. So I think we have to recognise that as being critical to the success. And apologies to my colleagues at the agency for not making that clearer during my report.
Thank you. There don't appear to be any more questions. James, it's interesting. Councillor Thurston talked about the Pies Pa, that new route that was a trial, and you don't show it here particularly, but that addition based on the pressure of a certain sector hasn't actually been that successful, and so we do need to proceed, but proceed with caution. And now I've got Councillor Thurston has moved 1, 2, and 3 on page 65. Do I have a seconder? Mr. Thomas has seconded. Any further discussion?
Chairman, can I just make a point of clarification to my colleague, Councillor Brunning? Look, Councillor, I fully understand there's a huge amount of work to be undertaken that may or may not lead ultimately to a trial. Don't for a moment think that I'm pushing for a trial at this point in time.
That's recognised in the resolution. So what did we say? Did we get a seconder? We did, Mr. Thomas. So all those in favour, please raise your hand. Against? Carried. We're on the home straight, people. I wanted to be finished by 12:30 and we're going to struggle, but we've got Rotorua Public Transport Refresh.
Yes, thank you. And this is last and by no means least in my view. So this item starts on page 73 of your agenda pack, and I must apologise for some formatting gremlins that seem to have appeared on pages 76 and 77. So in my Word copy, the text and the maps are perfectly aligned, but unfortunately in the PDF, the maps have actually obliterated some of the text. So what I will endeavour to do is make sure you understand the text on those pages, because the stuff there that if you read, you'd say that doesn't actually make sense, and that's because some text is missing. So apologies for those formatting issues. What I'd like to do is actually start by going to page 81 of your agenda pack. And firstly, I should also introduce my colleague, Andrew Dyer, who is on this call. So Andrew is an experienced bus operator and passenger transport consultant who has been helping my team over the last, well, probably nearly a year or so now, both with the Part 1 refresh and also Rotorua. So Andrew's role really is to answer any difficult questions that I can't answer, because he's done the detailed work, and I'm just trying to present it in as digestible a way as I possibly can. So let's get to page 81, because this is really critical for the matter at hand. So you'll see a chart and a table. The chart essentially shows the long-term decline in patronage on the Rotorua urban bus network. So in financial year 2014-15, there were 973,000 trips. By financial year 2020-21, that had declined to just over 350,000. So essentially, we've lost nearly 2/3 of our patronage over that period of time. And I'd hope you would agree that on the basis of those figures, really doing nothing is not an option, because those kinds of patronage declines are things that we really have to actually take seriously and address. The table below the chart just shows a breakdown by the different routes in the existing network. and shows the annual revenue, the annual passengers, the average passengers per trip, the maximum load on any trip, and also the subsidy per passenger. And you'll see there are some pretty large figures in that last column, which demonstrate that although we are still providing what on the face of it is a pretty good service for the size of area, the levels of patronage are not reflecting that. And as a result, the subsidy is now considerably higher than it once was when we had much higher levels of growth. So that really does provide the context for the need to undertake this refresh work. So as with the Western Bay, the idea of the refresh is to make better use of our existing funding before we think about where any additional funding might go. And there are a couple of pieces of historic context to give you. Firstly, you will recall that back in March and April of last year, as part of the, or sorry, this year I should say, as part of the annual plan, there was a consultation on the future of the Rotorua public transport network, and various options were put forward for improvements to that network. The public consultation perhaps wasn't as well patronised as we'd have ideally liked it to be. But nevertheless, there were some views expressed about a preferred approach, which is based on what's called the balanced network. And that still forms part of our long-term aspiration to deliver service improvements. But before we do that, we have to make better use of what we've got and get the existing network on a stable footing. The other piece of really important context is again in relation to Waka Kotahi. So as part of the National Land Transport Programme settlement, Waka Kotahi have declined to provide support to essentially the balanced approach in the RLTP. So they've said that essentially at the moment, because of the concerns around the levels of patronage, they're not currently prepared to put money from the NLTP into the process to increase services. And in all honesty, that's pretty understandable, because again, we need to stabilise and get some growth and give our co-investors at Waka Kotahi confidence that we've got something they can actually then back in the future. And the opportunity is pretty live, because we will have a new contract for Rotorua in 2024. So there is an opportunity to use the next 2 or 3 years essentially not only to stabilise but also to investigate opportunities for improvements as part of that new contract. So I don't want to give the impression to anyone that we're simply going to do minimum and let Rotorua die for the rest of time. We are still very ambitious for growth, but we have to address the current issues as outlined in those patronage figures before we do that. So very briefly, how do we actually make that happen? So on page 76 of your pack is essentially an outline of a revised network for Rotorua. And essentially there are some design principles associated with that I want to very, very briefly take you through. The first of those is to essentially simplify the existing network of, I think it's 11 routes into 5. 3 of those would essentially operate cross town and 2 would terminate in or near the CBD. So there's much greater legibility and consistency for the customer. Having a smaller number of routes actually does make things quite a lot easier to understand. Critical to all of this is improving access to and within the CBD by serving both existing stops and a series of new bus stops in both directions. On page 77, there is a map which shows proposals for new bus stops in the CBD and also removal of some bus stops that actually could be surplus to requirements. Overall, there's an increase in the number of stops in the CBD. And that's because at the moment, the challenge we have is that there are a small number of stops in locations that are not ideal for where people actually need to get to. Providing more stops certainly helps to increase that penetration of the commercial area and get people, particularly those with mobility impairments, much closer to where they need to be. So the infrastructure side of this project is absolutely critical to its overall success. It has to be implemented in conjunction with the service changes that we have outlined, and that's something that we'll be discussing further with Waka Kotahi and also internally to understand how we may fund those infrastructure improvements. Key to all this, of course, is Rotorua Lakes Council as the road controlling authority and the provider of infrastructure. We've been having a lot of very detailed discussions with them about the refresh project. They have been really, really supportive, and again, are an absolute pleasure to work with. And we feel that we've got a really good way forward now in terms of investigating how we can actually get these improvements for passengers. We're all on the same page, and we're also really excited to be contributing to some much wider issues around the CBD regeneration. There's never really been, I think, a better time to undertake these changes in Rotorua. We're also looking at ensuring that punctuality is improved. Now, primarily that is around making sure that existing timetables actually reflect realities on the ground. So a lot of people have talked about the roadworks and the impact of those, both those on Tinai Road and also now out towards Nongataha. Those roadworks will be going on for a period of time, and our timetables will need to reflect the realities of delays that currently exist on the network. Certainly in future, we'll be looking at bus priority to minimise those delays. But as part of this project, we essentially have to get the existing punctuality working better so that people have confidence that while perhaps their bus might take slightly longer in terms of time, it at least will turn up when it says it does. You know, that's absolutely critical for customer confidence. And as I mentioned right at the start of this meeting, marketing and fair promotion, is absolutely critical to everything we do. Rotorua is a great place to live and also to come and visit. And we feel there's an awful lot we can do as part of a post-COVID recovery to promote the bus network, not only to the people who live and work there, but the people who visit Rotorua for leisure and for holidays. There's a huge number of opportunities that we have identified. And in the report towards the end, I think on page X78, we've got quite a long list of ideas, things we'd ideally like to try out as part of this process. So when we go to a public consultation exercise, which we're looking at for sometime in the middle of 2022, we'll have some really great ideas about what customers might actually want to see and what would encourage them to use the bus network. That really is, in terms of the report, all I want to cover. We're happy, Andrew and myself, to answer any more detailed questions. Again, as with the Western Bay, COVID does introduce some concerns and issues around public consultation. Ideally, we'd always like to do it face-to-face because it means we get much better interaction with customers and communities than we would online. But in the world we live in, the ability to do that is somewhat compromised at the moment, which is why at the moment we are still a little bit uncertain about what we're going to do in terms of public consultation and when we're going to do it. But be clear, we will be consulting extensively on this in order to understand whether these proposals are going to make a real difference to the way that people view the public transport network in Rotorua, which is something we want communities to be proud of. Thank you.
All right, I've got three people wanting to question. Councillor Thurston first, Mr. Thomas, and then Commissioner Selwood. Councillor Thurston.
Thank you, Chairman. Look, I'll be really brief. Look, I'm happy to move the recommendations on page 73. Clearly, it's an example of doing nothing's not an option. And likewise, I think it's a real classic textbook example of use it or lose it. But can I just commend our staff and everyone for the collaboration and the consultation with RLC, because I collectively believe, or I genuinely believe that it's through a collective approach that we will sort this out. So, but no, it's a sad state of affairs, public transport in Rotorua, but we've provided a Rolls-Royce service and it hasn't been used. And as I've commented on a number of occasions, everyone in Rotorua appears to drive their own motor car. So pressure on the bus service is just not forthcoming. So no, happy to move it when it comes the time, but thank you to the staff for the collaboration and consultation that they're ongoing doing with RLC. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Councillor Thurston.
Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Look, I'd just like to reiterate Councillor Thurston's comments. I know staff at Rotorua have really enjoyed working with regional council staff on this project, and there is excitement around it. I would implore both staff and councillors that recommendation 2, that the consultation will now take place mid-2022, I do want to say that is too late. And I would implore that consultation to happen February, March. A huge reason for this is especially looking at putting in new bus stops or rearranging things in the CBD. To be able to do that in 2022, RLC will need to put variances into their annual plan. If we don't do this till mid-2022, then nothing can happen from RLC's point of view until mid-2023. So it's just another year's delay. So if we can bring that consultation forward to early 2022, I think that's absolutely vital to keep this moving forward. Just a couple of quick comments about the plan changes, and I think that they look great, and simplifying the routes is a really good way to go. I know that COVID really impacted on working this stuff out. I know, especially for you, Andrew, it is quite an imposition on you. And I just want to make a couple of comments, especially around the layout for the CBD and the new bus stops, that what I would like to see is if both council staff can get together as soon as practical and maybe do a site visit to some of those new sites, because actually, while it might look on Google Maps that these are appropriate places, when you get out and physically check where they are, they're sites that quite likely won't work. And for Kawi Street, for instance, looks great on Google Maps, but it's difficult to get a car down, let alone a bus. There is so much parking in that street. So I think there are some areas there that need a little bit of movement around, maybe a little bit more thought on the processes. Once again, around some of those bus stops, great to sort those out, but some locations most probably aren't feasible. I think my final comment, just going back to that mid-2022, I don't know what it's like for regional councillors, but electioneering starts early in Rotorua, and if this consultation was done mid-year, it could very easily become a politicised football. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas, and through the chair, we certainly will go away and reconsider our timeframes. We're trying to balance an awful lot of work here and also staff pressure as a result of COVID. So we're trying our best to get the balance between getting on with stuff we'd really love to get on with and recognising the realities of the situation we find ourselves in. But you're absolutely right in terms of, ideally we would be going out exactly as you say, and we will certainly do our level best to come up with something that meets those timescales and gets things moving for the very valid reasons that you outline. Yes, absolutely right. In terms of site visits, we know to our cost from other areas of the region that when particularly consultants do work on relocations of bus facilities, and if they don't actually visit the sites and understand the realities on the ground, you can get some pretty suboptimal outcomes associated with those. So subject to the restrictions and complying with all the very necessary government health and safety requirements, we are intending to get out and look at those practical issues in detail with colleagues from RLC sometime in December. Andrew in particular is chomping at the bit from his Auckland gilded cage to get out down there. So if we can make it happen, we absolutely will. And thank you again for your support.
Yeah. Thank you, James. And Andrew, we look forward to seeing you. And James, on that consultation, RLC staff are really happy to assist in any way they can.
Awesome. Thank you.
Andrew.
Just to add to endorse all James has said, and to say that I've already been talking to Nikki Carling at Rotorua Lakes, and we've got a site meeting scheduled for next month before Christmas, because the devil can be in the detail in bus stop positioning. And the other thing we're doing is we're going to talk to Richie's, the contractor, because the other big thing is to make sure that they're on board with delivering any changes that we make, and also just getting down to some of those real detailed stuff about driving a bus around the new proposed routes and making sure that if we say the bus can do A to B in 12 minutes, it can do it in 12 minutes, because as James said, punctuality and reliability are so important.
Commissioner Selwyn.
Thank you. I just wanted to say this is exactly an example of the kind of analysis that I think is fundamental to getting better service provision into the future. I think so thank you, Andrew, for all of your work. The analysis on page 81 is exactly what I'm hopeful that we'll be able to do right across the network. I think probably the missing element for me is the time of day data. And when you look at the average passengers per trip at overall of 2.46, which is scarcely better than a private motor vehicle, which are typically sort of about 1 to 1.5, it signals that the frequency of service is an issue as much as the route. And that's what's driving some of the subsidy per passenger much higher. And going back to our previous agenda item, the potential for greater frequency for commuters at peak and much lower frequency or even on-demand service for those off-peak, and blending those to optimise subsidy might be the way for the future. But certainly on the basis of what we're seeing, this route plan for Rotorua looks effective, and an opportunity for us to really analyse further about how on-demand services might be a better option for the Rotorua and indeed the Tauranga context for certain locations. So just a comment, but well done to the team for the analysis so far.
Through the chair, thank you, Commissioner Selwood. And yes, I think the forthcoming contract review and renewal for Rotorua provides an opportunity to look at all kinds of different service model options, and that's going to be a really critical piece of work to undertake post this refresh, which at least we hope will provide firstly some very good data and insights into what's going on and why people don't use the bus as much as we'd ideally like them to, and then taking that forward into future service designs and looking at all kinds of factors which will enable us to come up with what we believe will be a much better and well-used service in the future.
Councillor Thurston.
Thank you, Chairman. Look, if you're willing, I'd like to propose an amended recommendation part 2 that public consultation on the Rotorua bus network refresh be conducted in the first quarter 2022?
It's got to be practical for staff. So do we have an opinion on that, James?
The only opinion I can offer at the moment, without talking to my staff and understanding our resource issues, is that we'll do our absolute level best, and we certainly would like to do that because that was our previous intention. So we don't take the decision to defer things lightly. So we'll go away and have a look at that and just provide some reassurance as to what we can practically do, and bearing in mind the COVID restrictions as well in terms of our method, whether it is face-to-face or more online.
Namuta.
Through the chair as well, just to add to that, you'll recall we are also rolling out free fares for school students early next year too. So this will be the first time it rolls out in Rotorua. So we just want to ensure that we have sufficient staff to be able to cover that, especially in the January, February months as well.
I think we have the staff, Chairman. Pregnant silence.
Well, we do have to be practical, and so I don't think your wording gives enough wriggle room.
Okay,
really.
But can we note somewhere in the minute that's taken that the committee's preference is for first quarter 2022?
Yeah, that's very fair.
I'm backing off here now. You realise, Chairman?
I do.
Do that.
I do. So
yeah, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. We should acknowledge.
We all understand the sentiment. So, Mr. Thomas, are you seconding that resolution? So, Amanda, have you got the wording for part 2?
I'll just share my screen. My understanding was it was staying the same, but we're noting in the minutes that the committee preference is that it happens earlier.
First quarter 2022.
In the first quarter 2022. Yeah.
Thank you, Amanda.
Everybody happy?
Chair, through you, could we just possibly change it to, instead of take place mid-2022, just change it to at the earliest possible date, 2022, which covers the range that allows for staff to be comfortable that they are able to do it. So we're just looking at the first possible date.
Is everyone happy with that? The mover, Lyle?
I can live with that.
You can live with that. Seconded. Do we have any discussion that you can see the motion? All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Against? Carried. Thank you very much. And I think we've done the public excluded. I think they came forward, didn't they, when I did the original minutes.
That's correct. There's no need to go into public excluded now.
All right. Any closing comments by anybody before we finish? We wanted to be finished at 12:30. We're 9 minutes late, but we can live with that.
Well, through the chair, I would just like to wish everyone a very happy Christmas. I think we can now say that on the 30th of November.
Okay, that sounds good to me. And thank you, staff, for you are putting in a big effort in public transport, in my view. It is always emotionally a struggle when we look at empty buses in our Tauranga City in particular. But them's the breaks. I can see jammed up cars in the middle of the day on Takitimu Drive down there going into Elizabeth Street right now. So it's not just a bus issue, it's a car issue as well. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good day. I declare the meeting closed.